All right. Good evening, everyone. All right, they got it turned up loud because they know I'm soft-spoken, so that's good. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay. Before we start, are there any prayer requests that we want to make mention before we get started? Okay, Rick? Gotcha. Okay. Any update, or is he just still recuperating? Okay, gotcha. Bill? Bill, did you have? Yeah. Did you have? Okay, sorry. I saw your hand. So, anyone else? No? All right. We'll start with a prayer, then we'll get started with the lesson. Dear God, we thank you for another day that you've given us, another beautiful, nice day. We've gotten plenty of rain in the past couple days. We've really been needing it. We thank you for that blessing. Lord, we ask that you be with the Greenroyd family as Rick is recovering from his surgeries that he's had, and we ask that your hand be on him and his doctors and help him to get through this as quickly and back to us as soon as possible. We also ask that you be with us as we continue our study, and let it be a good study of your word and pleasing to you. We ask that all these things be done in your Son's name. Amen. All right, so we're in Genesis 39. We're still in the interesting story of Joseph. He was really the favorite of the family, the golden child, if you will. But we're about to see here in this chapter that life is a bit of a ways away from where he used to be. He was sold into slavery at the end of 38, and now he is in Egypt, and we're about to get into where he ends up there. We'll get through all 23 verses, but I'll pause as we go and point out some things. But now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, there brought him from the Ishmaelites, who had brought him down there to Egypt. But the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. Okay, so bad things are happening to him. He was at home, doing all right. Maybe a nuisance to his brothers occasionally, but overall, doing all right. And then he goes and nags his brothers. This is going to be a little bit paraphrased, and they get annoyed and throw him in a pit. They want to kill him, but some of the older brothers tell him to calm down. No, we can't kill him. We'll just throw him in a pit, teach him a lesson. Well, they end up not just throwing him in a pit, but throwing him in a pit and selling him to some slavers that happen to pass by. So, long story short, sold in Egypt, and now he seems to be in possession of a pretty high-ranking Egyptian officer, very close to Pharaoh. And we can kind of see how this kind of played out because God was with Joseph. So what this means is he's in a bad situation so far in the opening, but it's not all bad because where he ends up, because the Lord's with him. So he seems to be taken care of for the most part at the moment. He became a successful man. The Lord was with him. And the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. All right. kind of the Midas touch going on with a lot of the tasks that he was given, caused everything to go right in his way. And as we continue in verse 3, his master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord caused all he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. All right. So the Lord being with Joseph caused Joseph to succeed in all of his tasks, which then caused Potiphar to take notice and gave him a promotion. Kind of like employee of the month, but employee of the month plus manager of everything he didn't want to have to manage or deal with. So pretty big deal for just kind of coming into this as a lowly servant, but with the power of God with Joseph and the fact that he was a upright individual himself really helped magnify this bad situation for the better for him initially. And we'll pick up in verse 5 from the yeah. I'm in ESV, but I have the handout, which I think is New King James. Oh, Genesis 39. Sorry. And we're in the verse 5. From the time he made him overseer of his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge because of him and had no concern about anything but the food he ate. So this compounding successfulness that Joseph has in Potiphar's house due to the Lord being with Joseph has caused Potiphar to just heap every aspect of management of his household, gave it to Joseph because of the outstanding success that he has with what he has been given already. And Potiphar just thinks, well, I'm doing all right, but give anything to him, it turns to gold. So really gives everything except figuring out what he is going to be eating to Joseph. Now, things get a little interesting here in verse 6 onward, but stay with me. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me my master has no concern about anything in the house and has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you're his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Potiphar wasn't the only one that was taking notice of Joseph's successfulness, and he didn't really help him in this one-sided situation that he wasn't the worst looking guy. It said he was handsome and in appearance and form, so maybe a slight athletic build due to working in the fields back home, but this is kind of just speculative from what we're getting, and she proceeds to hit on him. He politely declines, but we'll see here in a little bit how that is going to go wrong. But he still tries to maintain his good standing with his master and with God, because he says it would be a great wickedness and sin against God. Great wickedness would be against Potiphar, and the sin against God. So in this awful situation, he has kept his character and his moral compass, even though he's no longer seemed to be held accountable for his actions from his standpoint. But to him, he still relies and views God as his guide through this ordeal. But I'll continue through 10 through the rest. All right. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled to go out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said to them, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled to get out of the house. Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, 'The Hebrew servant whom you brought among us came into me to laugh at me, but as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house.' As soon as his master heard those words that his wife spoke to him, 'This is the way your servant treated me,' his anger was kindled, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison. There in the prison is where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed." All right. So, yes. Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I would be a bit defensive myself if someone was making the same accusations. Uh, with how he probably felt still as an outsider, but with some standing and stuff with Potiphar, I think he just got into that flight mode probably, and just he said, I'm not going to wait around and see what these other guys are that she's calling are going to have done with me in the meantime. I'm out of here, and I can see that too. But that's a good point. That's also a possibility. It's never mentioned that he loses sight of his faith or trust in God at this point. So that could also be a good reason for that too. But we see that this bad situation, this lie that's told about him ultimately isn't as bad as it could have been, because once he's in the prison, he's put in charge of the prison. It's each bad situation has a good underlying, almost immediate outcome, but he's still in prison, so it's not the greatest situation to be in. If we look down at the handout in the first bullet section, Joseph had seen his comfortable life unwind, but managed each situation with character. I would agree with that statement. The accusations against him, like you mentioned, didn't seem to bring any defense up or anything of that nature. It just kind of went with it at this point, because as a servant, he can't really put up much of a voice or defense at this point. So why is he why does he have this sort of character about him? We'll see these little bullets underlined down here will kind of get us to that answer as we progress. He was favored by his father, despised by his brothers. Well, that's a pretty good thing to see, because he was loved by his father. He was the favorite and despised by his brothers. They wanted to kill him, but some of his other brothers said, "We don't like him either, but don't kill him. We'll sell him instead." So I don't know if I'd be as upset with a family member that I'd want to sell them away like you would a misbehaving pet or something of that nature. But that's how they ultimately treat him. And we see that he is sold into slavery. Next couple of bullets, a little more positive. He became chief servant in the house of Potiphar. We saw that and how that unfolded itself. He was pursued by his master's wife and resisted her advances. Yep, he sure did. And to good effect as well. Whether we can apply that to social settings in our real lives, not saying that I won't maybe eventually encounter this, but I've never had this problem of needing to resist advances from another individual, but I'm glad that we do see ways to go about that and examples of that in the Bible. He was accused of improper actions toward the master's wife and put in prison. Yes, with no defense given on his behalf. He rose and became chief trustee in prison. Yeah, so that really puts us to where we're at. I just got done reading, and now I'm recapping that all again to you to say that with all this that has happened to him and all this bad stuff, I really like how in the last verse it says the Lord was with him. In whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. you're definitely right on the money with that. We're on track to get to that in the second bullet, and it even dismayed his father. It wasn't just his brothers. His dad was maybe you're getting a little crazy here with these visions, which probably dismay him a little bit, but he doesn't quite seem to get the message, and ultimately his brothers send that message to him, but that's definitely a good point. He's also noted to be loved by his father more because of his father's age when he was born. The favorite wife, yeah. Yep. That's good old Laban. I don't know if I'd want him as a father-in-law. Hey, you'll pay me, that's good, cool. And you'll also arrange a marriage for me. Very nice. All right. I love one of your daughters, and you pulled a fast one on me. Okay, cool. So he did end up marrying Leah and Rachel, but Rachel was the favorite wife. And of course, the favorite wife bore the favorite son, which was Joseph. He was also shown favoritism by receiving special gifts from his father, the coat of many colors that he was gifted, and then was torn up and staged by his brothers when they returned to his father after selling him into slavery. And like Blue brought up, he did share his dreams, his premonitions with his family. His family listened, but they didn't quite accept what he was saying. And this final point in the second bullet, somewhere in his youth, Joseph developed a strong character to determine right and wrong in his choices. That's a pretty big point. And it's also interesting about that point is that in verse 2 of chapter 39 and verse 23, it's mentioned the Lord was with Joseph. And even throughout the rest of this chapter, it mentions how the Lord blessed his endeavors and things of that nature. So obviously, he's picked up on something from his early childhood that would give him a reverence and fear towards God, and really pivoted him in the right direction towards eventually being utilized as a tool of God to fulfill what he needs, as we are seeing in chapter 39. This can be a little speculative coming out of second opinions, but them being a more orally tradition-taught group of people, I would imagine that he was told stories of his grandfather and great-grandfather, being Isaac and Abraham, and how they served God righteously, and how they did right in the face of difficult obstacles. And that could have skewed his moral spectrum in a positive, but again, that's a speculation, and the influencer of that character is seen in the choices he makes as a servant and as a prisoner. Yes, the influence of that character is most likely God, because everything we see in his actions up to this point fall in line with how a follower of God and a reverent individual of that time would act. And he exemplifies all of those with great, in great detail. All right. I was a little worried we wouldn't get to these, but we got there. All right. Got some questions. In what ways do we see the character of Joseph in the early stage of Joseph's life? A little bit. Oh yeah, I'd imagine that compounding over the years really just rose to that boiling point, and which is interesting because favored in life back home, but also when he's a prisoner, favored as a prisoner, which, I guess is better than being the not so favored prisoner and being abused and things of that nature. So yeah, that's good. We see some similarities with his early and later life. That is a good point. Interesting. You know, that's true. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Uh, yeah, that's true. And yeah. Mhm. Yeah, and that's the beauty of some of these questions is we're all putting our own thoughts and perspective into this picture. And like you said, that something about that character really was an anchor for him to go to, because otherwise most other people would have folded a while ago. And to make point about his earlier conversation with his family. He might have thought he was being genuine in his delivery, but sometimes that doesn't really translate depending on the subject and context in which they are presenting what they have experienced, especially at a younger age. There's probably some excitement behind it, which can also be perceived as arrogance and things of that nature. But all these thoughts are good, and it's good to get this flow of thought and discussion going. Well, yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. He, that's a good point. Maybe Leah. He's like, why is he making such a big fuss, a big noise? What does this have to do with where he's at currently? And that's a good point. Even his parents were a little wary of his dreams and his thoughts. That's good. It's good stuff. As a trusted servant, why did Joseph remain in Egypt rather than escape and return home? Okay. This is a good one. Taken from his home, sold into slavery. I'd be looking for the first exit if I was in a similar situation like that. Even if conditions weren't awful, I mean, he has to have a longing for home. It's very interesting that even though with all that stuff going on, he had no inclination that we can see through the text that he was trying to get out of there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Isaac's. Mm-hmm. Son of Abraham. Mm-hmm. That's a good that's a good point. And part of it's some of that just the human side of us. We can have this great pedigree lineage and all of that, and know, they can see things from a certain perspective by what they were passed down from their fathers and grandfathers, and they kind of have an eye out sometimes, but it seems sometimes they don't quite see the picture. Like how later we see the Jews and Jesus. A lot of the higher ups, they didn't understand who this guy was making a big ruckus and a big fuss. And not that Jacob was mean or belittling to Joseph from what we have, but maybe there was a inclination of, what are you rambling on about, kid? knock it out. Go, do your chores or some kind of that maybe adult mentality. But I'm just, I'm trying to help frame this without getting too speculative. But it's a good thought to bring up, and that's the same thought I was kind of having going through this, and it does make you wonder, because it doesn't really. Yeah, it's. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good point, and only about 2 generations separation. So really, it's a good point to bring up. Probably. Hmm. Hmm. That's true. Hmm. 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 Yeah, and I'm kind of leaning towards that way with number two, because like you said, if everything was going right, even in the wrong or worse situations, besides going home, what would the real draw be for him to leave? Um, and like you said, um, the success and all the things that were helping him through these situations, he could perceive as God telling him, "Hey, it'll be all right. I'm still with you, and just stay right here." Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Hmm. That's true. That's true. And I glad and I like that you brought that up too, because the brothers really sold his death to their father, and if he showed up out of the blue one day, that would really put a strain on his relationship with his brothers even more, and a strain with their dad and the whole family dynamic, because they lied to him and wanted to murder him, but they didn't, and they were negligent with their story when they let him get attacked by that animal that they staged the coat with, and if his brothers treated him that bad before, if he came back alive and put the whole strain on the family, what would they do in retaliation, maybe in their minds, to try and rectify the situation, even though it's all kind of messed up to begin with? I like that. Yeah, that's the other side of the coin. Hmm. That's, yep, that's a great point, and it's a good it's a good question to think about, because we have this. It's almost seems like a straightforward question, but there's 2 to 3 different ways we can gear uh, this question towards the information we're given, and kind of put a more not a definitive black and white answer, but more of a kind of fluid this or that, which lends itself either way. Uh, let's see. Yeah, we'll make it to 3. Okay. Let's see. What 2 primary factors did Joseph apply to not succumb to the desires of Potiphar's wife? Ooh, that's a good one. Mm-hmm. That's true. And like you mentioned in verse 9, it would have been a great wickedness potentially against Potiphar, but it can also go towards God in a sense too, because it would be a sin and wickedness on both towards both parties, because not only would he be breaking the trust of his master, but he also would be breaking his character and his moral direction and his integrity towards God. It's a good answer. Good answer. All right. We might make it to 4. This is good. This is good. I was worried that wouldn't get to any of the questions. I was worried I'd ramble on for 40 minutes. At what point in a personal life does character become a force in choices that are made? Ooh, yes. If we're looking. Oh yeah, it's a pretty good indication. And like you said, if they keep making the same dumb decision over and over again, you're like, okay, why aren't we certifying this person as insane, and why isn't there any steps towards maybe enlightening this person? Hey, if you keep doing that, you're gonna get the same result. But that's a good way to look at it. Sometimes never. But that's a good question. Oh man. Force and choices that are made. Mm-hmm. like the saying, it builds character. Rub some dirt on it. Are you going to sink or are you going to swim? Not that I want to imply that God specifically put Joseph in this not optimal situation, but it was used to the benefit of Joseph and of God, because Joseph, he swam well. It built his character, like you were mentioning, and it furthered God's plan for the better. But unless want to get to 5, I think we're at our time. Is there any last thoughts or remarks before we close? Yeah, sorry. Yes. That's great. That's right at the end. We get some really good. Man, all right. I wish we could go a little longer. I'm excited to get up here and to be able to do this, but we gotta wrap up at some point. And I think we're done. All right. I appreciate your time, and thanks for letting me fill in.